Claire Evans pressed her palm against the cool granite countertop, watching steam rise from her untouched coffee cup. Something crawled beneath her skin, a restless, electric sensation that had been growing stronger each morning for weeks. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and Daniel's expensive cologne, but underneath lurked something else, something rotten. "You're staring again," Daniel said without looking up from his phone. His voice carried that edge it always had lately, sharp enough to cut. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Claire whispered, though her throat felt tight. She studied his profile, the strong jaw she'd once loved to trace with her fingertips, now clenched with irritation. When had he stopped meeting her eyes? Daniel's fingers flew across his phone screen, typing furiously. The rapid tapping echoed through the kitchen like machine gun fire. Claire's stomach twisted. Who needed to be contacted so urgently at 7 in the morning? "Daddy, can you help me with my backpack?" Their 8-year-old son Tommy bounded into the kitchen, his hair still messy from sleep. "Not now, sport. Daddy's got important work stuff," Daniel replied, still not lifting his gaze from the glowing screen. Claire watched Tommy's face fall, his small shoulders sagging. Something dark and hot flashed through her chest. She knelt beside her son, pulling his backpack straps tight. "There you go, sweetheart. All set for school," she said softly, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Over Tommy's head she caught Daniel smirking, not at his son, but at whatever message he'd just received. The front door slammed as Daniel left for work, his goodbye perfunctory. Claire stood in the sudden silence, her hands trembling slightly as she cleared the breakfast dishes. The ceramic plates clinked against each other, a sharp, brittle sound that made her wince. That afternoon, while folding laundry in their bedroom, Claire found herself staring at Daniel's side of the closet. 3 new shirts hung there, expensive ones she didn't remember him buying. The tags were still attached, but the creases suggested they'd been tried on. For whom was he dressing up? Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Megan. "Can't make dinner tonight. Something came up at work. Rain check?" Claire frowned. Megan had canceled their weekly sister dinners 3 times this month. Always work, always vague excuses. She typed back a quick, "no problem," but her fingers hesitated over the send button. When had everyone in her life become so secretive? Evening brought no relief. Daniel arrived home after 9, claiming traffic delays. He moved through their house like a ghost, present but unreachable. During dinner, he pushed food around his plate without eating, his mind clearly elsewhere. "How was your day?" Claire asked, desperate to break the suffocating silence. "Busy. Complicated client situations," Daniel muttered, then immediately excused himself to take a phone call in his office. Claire sat alone at their dining room table, listening to the muffled sound of his voice through the closed door. His tone was different when he spoke to whoever was on that call, warmer, more animated. She strained to hear words, but could only catch fragments. "Soon. Everything in place. She won't suspect." Her blood turned to ice water. Later that night, Claire lay rigid in bed beside Daniel's sleeping form. His phone rested on the nightstand, face down as always now. She'd never been the type to snoop, had always trusted implicitly. But trust felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. The house settled around them with familiar creaks and sighs, but tonight every sound felt ominous. A branch scraped against the bedroom window with fingernail persistence. The heating system clicked on with a mechanical gasp. Even Daniel's breathing seemed different, shallower, more guarded, as if he were only pretending to sleep. Claire closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she'd felt truly safe in her own home. The memory eluded her, slipping away like smoke. Instead, she found herself cataloging recent changes. Daniel's new workout routine, his sudden interest in expensive clothes, the way he'd started showering immediately after coming home from work. Her phone glowed 3:17 a.m. when she finally gave up on sleep. She padded barefoot to the kitchen, seeking the comfort of routine, warm milk, maybe some reading. But as she passed Daniel's home office, she noticed a sliver of light beneath the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He'd been asleep when she left the bedroom, hadn't he? Claire pressed her ear to the door, holding her breath. Silence, but the light remained, casting its thin golden line across the hardwood floor like an accusation. She turned the handle slowly, expecting resistance. Instead, the door swung open easily, revealing Daniel's empty desk chair and his laptop sitting open, its screensaver dancing with geometric patterns. He must have forgotten to shut it down completely. Claire stood frozen in the doorway. The smart thing would be to close the door and return to bed. The safe thing would be to continue trusting, continue believing in the fairy tale they'd built together. But fairy tales were for children, and she was tired of being naive. Her bare feet whispered across the hardwood as she approached the desk. The laptop hummed softly, waiting. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen, pale, hollow-eyed, unrecognizable. When had she started looking so haunted? A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Footsteps, Daniel moving around their bedroom. Claire's hand hovered over the laptop's touchpad. One click would wake the machine. One click might shatter everything she'd believed about her life. One click could change everything. The footsteps stopped. Bathroom door closing. Water running. She had maybe 5 minutes. Her finger pressed down, and the screen blazed to life. The laptop screen illuminated Claire's face with harsh white light, making her look like a ghost haunting her own home. Daniel's desktop appeared. Organized. Professional, exactly what she'd expected. But her hands shook as she navigated to his email program, muscle memory guiding her to the icon she'd seen him click countless times. The inbox loaded with corporate correspondence, client updates, meeting schedules, nothing unusual. Claire's breathing steadied slightly. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe. Then she saw it. A folder labeled personal that she'd never noticed before, tucked between tax documents and insurance. Her cursor hovered over it, wavering like a butterfly uncertain of landing. Upstairs, the shower turned on. Steam would fog the bathroom mirror. Daniel would shave, brush his teeth. She had 15 minutes, maybe 20 if he decided to luxuriate in the hot water like he sometimes did after particularly stressful days. Claire double-clicked. Password required. Her stomach dropped. In 12 years of marriage, Daniel had never password-protected anything from her. They'd shared everything: bank accounts, credit cards, even social media passwords for the occasional forgotten login. This secretiveness was new, deliberate. She stared at the empty password field, her mind racing. What would Daniel use? Their anniversary? Too obvious. His birthday? Their children's names? Her fingers trembled as she typed, Tommy and Emma 2016. Access denied. She tried their wedding date, their first apartment address, even the name of his college roommate. Each rejection felt like a small betrayal, evidence of how far apart they'd drifted. The shower was still running, but Claire knew Daniel's routines better than her own breathing patterns. 7 minutes for washing, 3 minutes for standing under the hot spray thinking about whatever consumed him these days. One more try. She closed her eyes, thinking about Daniel's recent behavior, his newfound secrecy. What mattered to him now? What occupied his thoughts? Her eyes snapped open. She typed, New Beginnings 2024. The folder opened. Claire's world tilted sideways. Dozens of emails filled the screen, all dated within the last 6 months. The sender names made her nauseated. M. Rodriguez appeared again and again alongside Daniel's responses, but it was the email addresses that made her blood freeze. M. Rodriguez at cityplanninginc.com, Megan's work email, her sister, her baby sister who'd lived with them for 3 months after her divorce, who'd cried on Claire's shoulder about feeling worthless and alone. The same sister who'd been too busy for their weekly dinners, too occupied with mysterious work projects to spend time with Claire's children who adored her. Claire clicked the first email, dated 6 months ago. From Daniel.Evans to M. Rodriguez. Subject: Coffee soon? Megan, thanks for listening yesterday. Claire's been so distant lately, buried in her own world with the kids and her part-time job. It's nice to talk to someone who actually understands what I'm going through. Coffee tomorrow. Daniel. The words swam before Claire's eyes. She'd been distant? She'd been working part-time to help with Tommy's learning difficulties, spending hours each night helping him with homework while Daniel claimed he was too tired from work to assist. She clicked the next email. From M. Rodriguez to Daniel Evans. Subject, coffee soon. Daniel, I felt the same connection. You deserve so much more than what you're getting at home. Claire has always been the lucky one. Everything just falls into her lap. Maybe it's time for you to think about what you want for once. XOXO M. Claire's vision blurred. Her own sister writing about her like she was some spoiled princess who'd never worked for anything. Claire, who'd supported Daniel through his CPA certification, who'd taken out student loans so he could start his consulting business, who'd sacrificed her own career dreams to raise their children. The shower shut off upstairs. Panic shot through Claire's nervous system like electricity. She scrolled frantically through more emails, her mind barely processing the escalating intimacy, the plans taking shape in Daniel and Megan's digital affair. Meeting locations, hotel names, detailed discussions about Claire's emotional unavailability and how she took Daniel for granted. Footsteps across the bedroom floor above. Claire reached the most recent email, sent just yesterday while she'd been at Tommy's parent-teacher conference. Daniel.Evans, Megan M. Rodriguez. Subject, timeline, my love. Everything's falling into place perfectly. The account transfers are set up. I'll move the money gradually over the next month so Claire won't notice. The house appraisal came in higher than expected, so we'll have even more to start fresh with. I've been thinking about what you said about Emma and Tommy. I know it seems harsh, but they'll be better off with Claire. She's always been the nurturing one anyway, and we can't afford the complications of custody battles. Once we're established in Portland, we can revisit the situation. I love you, Megan. I can't wait to build a real life with someone who actually sees me, who appreciates what I bring to the table. Just a few more weeks of pretending and we'll be free. Forever yours, D. The bedroom door opened upstairs. Claire's hands flew across the keyboard, closing windows, returning the desktop to its innocent corporate facade. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain Daniel would hear it from the second floor. She'd barely closed the laptop when his footsteps started down the stairs. Claire forced herself to move casually toward the kitchen, flicking on lights as if she'd simply been getting a glass of water. Her hands shook as she filled a cup from the tap, the sound of running water masking the raggedness of her breathing. Claire? Daniel's voice drifted from the office. What are you doing up? Couldn't sleep, she called back, proud that her voice sounded almost normal. Just getting some water. Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair damp from the shower, wearing the navy robe she'd bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. He looked like the same man she'd married, but now she saw the performance in his concerned expression, the calculated way he approached her. Bad dreams again? He asked, his voice gentle with practiced sympathy. Claire wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the water glass at his lying face, to demand he explain the emails, to ask how he could stand there pretending to care while planning to destroy everything they'd built. Instead, she nodded. Just restless. I'll try to get back to sleep. Daniel moved closer, placing his hands on her shoulders. His touch, once comforting, now felt like cold serpents coiling around her. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. Dr. Martinez always said you tend to overthink things. The casual cruelty took her breath away. He was already laying groundwork, planting seeds of doubt about her mental state. How long had he been doing this? How many of her legitimate concerns had he dismissed as anxiety or paranoia? Maybe, Claire whispered, because anything else might give her away. Daniel kissed her forehead, a gesture that had once made her feel cherished. Now it felt like Judas marking her for betrayal. Come back to bed, he murmured. We both need rest. Claire followed him upstairs on unsteady legs, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd discovered. As she slipped beneath their covers, Daniel's arm came around her waist, possessive even in sleep. She lay rigid in the darkness, listening to his breathing even out, feeling the weight of his arm like a chain across her ribs. Every detail of their shared bedroom felt different now. The wedding photos on the dresser mocked her with their false promises. The family portraits on the walls showed her a life that had already ended. She just hadn't known it yet. Portland. They were planning to move to Portland, 3,000 miles from everything she knew. And they weren't planning to take Tommy and Emma, her children, her babies. Claire's eyes burned in the darkness, but she didn't cry. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she began to plan. Claire woke before dawn, her body rigid with purpose. Daniel slept beside her, one arm flung across his eyes as if shielding himself from invisible accusations. In the pale morning light filtering through their curtains, he looked younger, more vulnerable. For a moment, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined everything: the emails, the betrayal, the casual way they discussed abandoning her children. Then Daniel's phone buzzed on his nightstand. Even in sleep, he reached for it instinctively, his fingers closing around the device like a lifeline. The gesture was so automatic, so possessive, that Claire's momentary softness crystallized back into cold fury. She slipped from bed and padded to the bathroom, closing the door before allowing herself to breathe. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, sharp-featured, dangerous. Good. She would need that hardness for what came next. The morning routine proceeded normally. Daniel showered again, spent longer than usual styling his hair. Claire made breakfast, packed the children's lunches, helped Emma find her favorite sweater. Every domestic gesture felt like performance art now, each smile and casual touch a small masterpiece of deception. "I'll be home late tonight," Daniel announced over his coffee cup. "Client dinner in the city." "Of course," Claire replied, her voice steady. She knew better now. There would be no client dinner. There would be Megan, probably at that hotel Claire had noticed charged to their joint credit card 3 times this month. After Daniel left, Claire drove the children to school with mechanical precision. Emma chattered about her art project while Tommy practiced multiplication tables under his breath. Their innocent voices filled the car, but Claire heard everything through a filter of rage. These were the children Daniel was planning to abandon. These were the little souls he'd decided were inconvenient to his fresh start. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma asked as they pulled up to the school. "You look funny." Claire forced her expression into maternal concern. "Just tired, sweetheart. Have a wonderful day." She waited until both children disappeared into the brick building before allowing her mask to slip. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. She needed proof, more than just emails. She needed evidence that would hold up in court, that would protect her children, that would ensure Daniel and Megan paid for their betrayal. But first, she needed to confront her sister. Megan's apartment building squatted like a concrete tumor in one of the city's rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. Claire had helped her sister find the place after her divorce, had even co-signed the lease when Megan's credit proved insufficient. Another kindness that had been twisted into opportunity. The lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and disappointment. Claire rode the elevator to the 4th floor. Her reflection multiplied endlessly in the polished metal doors. Each image looked more distorted than the last, like funhouse mirrors reflecting her fragmenting reality. She knocked on apartment 4B with steady knuckles, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Footsteps approached the door, hesitated. "Claire?" Megan's voice carried surprise and something else. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. "Open the door, Megan." The locks clicked, 3 of them, Claire noticed. When had her sister become so security-conscious? The door swung open to reveal Megan in silk pajamas Claire didn't recognize, expensive ones that probably cost more than Claire's grocery budget for a month. Megan looked different. Her hair was professionally highlighted, her nails freshly manicured. She wore makeup despite being home alone at 10 in the morning, as if she'd been expecting someone, or as if she'd been somewhere she needed to look good. "This is a surprise," Megan said, stepping aside to let Claire enter. "I was just about to jump in the shower before work." The apartment had changed too. New furniture, expensive artwork, fresh flowers and crystal vases Claire had never seen before. On the coffee table sat 2 wine glasses, one still bearing lipstick marks, the other showing the impression of masculine lips. "Nice place," Claire said, her voice deceptively casual. "Business must be good." Megan's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "I've been picking up some consulting work on the side. You know how it is. A girl's got to look out for herself." Claire moved deeper into the living room, noting details. Men's cologne lingered in the air. A tie was draped over the back of a chair. Silk, expensive, the same brand Daniel favored. On the kitchen counter she spotted a coffee mug bearing the logo of Daniel's favorite cafe. "I need to ask you something, Meg," Claire said, turning to face her sister, "and I need you to be honest with me." Megan's eyes flickered. a quick, nervous dart toward the bedroom door. Of course. What's wrong? You look upset. Are you having an affair with my husband? The question hung in the air like a blade. Megan's face went through a fascinating sequence of expressions: shock, indignation, calculation, and finally something that might have been relief. Claire, how could you even ask me that? But her voice lacked conviction, and her hand moved instinctively to her throat, covering what Claire now realized was a small hickey partially hidden by concealer. Because I know, Megan. I've seen the emails. The pretense crumbled. Megan's shoulders sagged, and when she looked up, her expression had transformed entirely. Gone was the guilty younger sister. In her place stood a woman Claire had never seen before. Cold, calculating, unapologetic. So you know, Megan said simply. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. You always were slower than people gave you credit for. The casual cruelty hit Claire like a physical blow. How long? 6 months, maybe longer if you count the emotional connection. Megan moved to the window, gazing out at the city skyline. Daniel's been unhappy for years, Claire. You just refused to see it. Unhappy enough to steal our savings? To abandon our children? Megan turned back to her, and Claire saw something truly frightening in her sister's eyes, not guilt or shame, but triumph. Daniel deserves better than a woman who takes him for granted. He's brilliant, ambitious, caring, and you treat him like a roommate who splits the bills. I love him. You love the idea of him. You love the security, the suburban dream, the way he makes you look successful to your friends. Megan's voice grew stronger, more confident. But when was the last time you actually looked at him, really saw him? When was the last time you made him feel appreciated, desired, important? Claire's mind reeled. Was there truth in Megan's accusations? Had she been so focused on the children, on maintaining their household, on the endless tasks of daily life that she'd neglected her marriage? That doesn't excuse. Excuse what? Finding happiness? Daniel and I didn't plan this, Claire. It just happened. We connected on a level you two never did. By planning to steal from me? By discussing my children like they're inconvenient pets? For the first time, Megan looked uncomfortable. The money is as much Daniel's as yours. And the children, they need stability. You can provide that better than we can right now. Right now? What about later? What about when you're settled in Portland and decide you want to play house? Megan's eyes widened slightly. So she hadn't expected Claire to know about Portland. We're not monsters, Claire. We'll visit. The children will understand eventually. Understand that their father abandoned them for their aunt? Understand that the two people who were supposed to love them most chose each other instead? You're being dramatic. I'm being a mother. The words exploded from Claire with such force that Megan stepped backward. Those are my babies, Megan. Tommy still has nightmares about monsters in his closet. Emma sleeps with the stuffed rabbit you gave her for Christmas. They love you, they trust you, and you're planning to disappear from their lives like they never mattered. Something flickered across Megan's face, regret perhaps, or the ghost of the sister Claire remembered from childhood, but it vanished quickly, replaced by defensive anger. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to steal your husband. But life isn't fair, Claire. You've had everything handed to you, the perfect husband, the beautiful children, the house, the stability. I've had nothing but failed relationships and dead-end jobs. For once, just once, I want something good, something real. At the cost of destroying everyone else? At the cost of taking what should have been mine in the first place? The mask slipped completely now, revealing years of resentment that Claire had never suspected. You were always Mom and Dad's favorite. You got married first, had kids first, bought a house first. Perfect Claire with her perfect life. Well, maybe it's my turn to be happy. Claire stared at her sister, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman standing before her bore Megan's face, but everything else was alien. The bitterness in her voice, the casual way she discussed destroying lives, the complete absence of remorse for betraying the sister who'd loved and supported her for 33 years. You think my life has been perfect? Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. You think marriage and children and mortgages are some kind of fairy tale? I've struggled, Megan. I've worked jobs I hated to help Daniel build his business. I've gone without things I wanted so the kids could have what they needed. I've held our family together through his moods and his silences and his gradually growing distance. Perfect? My life has been work. Constant, exhausting, invisible work. And now you'll get to do it alone, Megan said, her voice flat. Maybe you'll finally appreciate what you had. The words hit Claire like ice water. She understood now that there would be no reasoning with Megan, no appeal to sisterly love or family loyalty. The woman before her had made her choice months ago. When? Claire asked quietly. When what? When do you leave? When does my husband disappear with my sister and my life savings? Megan's hesitation told Claire everything she needed to know. Soon, her sister said finally. Daniel's handling the financial details. I'm finishing up my projects at work. We want to make sure everything's clean, legal. As if there was any way to legally justify what they were planning. Claire nodded slowly, absorbing the timeline. Soon meant she had days, maybe weeks before her world collapsed completely. Days to gather evidence, to protect her children, to prepare for a battle she'd never wanted to fight. I should go, Claire said, moving toward the door. Thank you for being honest with me, finally. Claire, wait. Megan's voice carried a note of something, uncertainty, perhaps even regret. I want you to know this isn't about hurting you. I never wanted to hurt you. Claire turned back to her sister, memorizing her face. After today, she knew they would never speak as sisters again. But you are hurting me, Megan. You're destroying me. And worse, you're hurting my children. You're stealing their father, their stability, their ability to trust the adults who are supposed to protect them. Claire's voice remained steady, but her eyes burned. And the worst part? You don't even care. She left Megan standing in the apartment doorway, surrounded by luxury, paid for with stolen affection and broken promises. As the elevator descended, Claire felt something inside her crystallize, not just anger or betrayal, but determination. Daniel and Megan had made their choice. Now it was time for Claire to make hers. Claire sat in her car outside Megan's building for several minutes, her hands trembling slightly as she processed everything that had just happened. The confrontation had confirmed her worst fears, but it had also revealed something crucial. They thought they were smarter than her. They thought she would crumble, accept their betrayal quietly, make their escape easier. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Running errands during lunch. Won't be reachable for a few hours. Claire almost laughed. More likely he was meeting with lawyers or real estate agents, setting up the infrastructure for their new life. She typed back a cheerful response, complete with heart emoji, then immediately called her own phone to leave herself a voicemail with the timestamp. If Daniel ever claimed he'd told her about his afternoon plans, she'd have proof of when that communication actually occurred. She was learning to think like them, calculating, manipulative, always planning 3 moves ahead. Her first stop was the bank. Claire walked into the marble and glass lobby of Chicago First National with purpose, her heels clicking authoritatively across the polished floor. She dressed carefully this morning in her best business suit, the one she'd worn to job interviews before Tommy was born. Professional armor for what felt increasingly like warfare. Mrs. Evans! Linda Chen, the relationship manager, greeted her warmly. What can I do for you today? I need to review all account activity for the past 6 months, Claire said, settling into the chair across from Linda's desk. Joint accounts, individual accounts, everything. Linda's fingers flew across her keyboard. Is everything all right? You seem tense. Claire manufactured a rueful smile. Just getting our finances organized for tax season. You know how it is? Daniel handles most of the day-to-day banking, but I want to make sure I understand everything. The account statements printed in crisp black and white, each page a revelation. Claire had been right about the hotel charges. 12 occasions over 5 months, always the same upscale property downtown. There were restaurant charges too, expensive ones, always for 2 people on nights Daniel had claimed to be working late. But the most damning evidence appeared in the transfer history. Starting 3 months ago, regular amounts had been moving from their joint savings into an account Claire didn't recognize. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, always just under the limits that would trigger automatic notifications to both account holders. Linda, what can you tell me about this account number? Claire pointed to the recurring transfers. Linda's expression grew troubled as she pulled up the information. Mrs. Evans, I'm not supposed to discuss account details, but this is very unusual. These transfers were authorized by Mr. Evans using his online banking access, but the receiving account is registered to someone else entirely. Someone else? A Megan Rodriguez. The account was opened 6 weeks ago with Mr. Evans listed as an authorized user. Linda's voice dropped to a confidential whisper. Between you and me, this looks exactly like the kind of setup we see in divorce cases, where one spouse is trying to hide assets. Claire's blood turned cold. Not only were they stealing from her, they were stupid about it. Daniel's financial expertise apparently didn't extend to covering his tracks effectively. Can you print out all the transfer records? I want to make sure our accountant has everything for tax preparation. Of course. And Mrs. Evans, if you're concerned about unauthorized access to your accounts, we can set up additional security measures. Dual authorization for transfers over a certain amount, text alerts for any account activity, that sort of thing. Yes, Claire said immediately. Set up every security measure you have. I want to know about every penny that moves in or out of our accounts. By the time she left the bank, Claire had a complete financial picture of Daniel and Megan's betrayal. More than $60,000 had been transferred to Megan's account, money from their children's college funds, their emergency savings, even the account they'd been building toward a family vacation to Disney World. Her next stop was David Morrison's law office. David had handled their wills and the house purchase, knew their family situation intimately. Claire had called ahead, claiming she needed to update their estate planning now that the children were older. David's office occupied the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, all mahogany furniture and leather-bound legal volumes designed to project competence and discretion. He greeted Claire with a warm handshake and the kind of concerned expression that made her realize her stress was more visible than she'd hoped. Claire, you mentioned on the phone this was urgent. Is everything all right with Daniel, the children? That's what I need to discuss with you, Claire said, settling into the client chair. But first, I need to ask about attorney-client privilege. If I tell you something in confidence, you can't share it with Daniel, even though you've represented both of us in the past. David's expression grew carefully neutral. That depends on the nature of what you're telling me. If it involves potential criminal activity or harm to others, I may have ethical obligations that override confidentiality. But generally speaking, what you tell me here stays between us. Claire opened her purse and withdrew a folder containing printed copies of the bank statements and email screenshots. I believe my husband is planning to leave me and take most of our assets with him. I need to know what my options are. For the next hour, she laid out everything. The emails, the financial transfers, the Portland plans, even Megan's involvement. David listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. This is bad, Claire, he said finally. Not just the adultery, though that's painful enough. What Daniel's doing with the money could constitute fraud, especially since he's moving funds from accounts with your name on them to an account you never authorized. What should I do? First, we need to stop any further asset depletion. I'll file an emergency motion with the family court to freeze all joint accounts pending a hearing. Second, we need to gather more evidence. What you have is good, but we need documentation that will hold up if this goes to trial. David reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small digital device. Voice recorder. Illinois is a single-party consent state, which means you can legally record conversations as long as you're part of them. If Daniel or Megan says anything incriminating, we want it preserved. Claire stared at the recorder, smaller than a cell phone. You want me to spy on my own husband? I want you to protect yourself and your children. Claire, what they're planning isn't just leaving you, it's destroying your financial stability and potentially traumatizing Tommy and Emma. This isn't about revenge, this is about survival. The weight of the recorder in her palm felt enormous, like holding a loaded weapon.
What about custody? If we divorce, would Daniel get the children half the time?
Under normal circumstances, probably, but if we can prove he was planning to abandon them, that he was willing to relocate across the country without including them in his plans, that changes the calculation significantly. A judge won't look kindly on a father who treats his children as inconvenient obstacles to his new relationship. Claire left the law office with a strategy, a timeline, and a terrible new understanding of what her life was about to become. Divorce court, custody battles, financial investigations. Her children's lives dissected by strangers in robes who would decide their futures based on legal precedents and evidentiary standards. That evening, she cooked Daniel's favorite meal, beef Wellington, which took hours of preparation and cost more than their usual grocery budget. She wanted everything perfect for what might be their last normal dinner together. Daniel arrived home later than usual, claiming traffic problems. He kissed her cheek absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. During dinner, Claire watched him carefully, noting the way his phone drew his attention even when face down on the table, the distracted way he responded to the children's chatter about school. "This is delicious," he said, cutting another piece of the Wellington. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion, just wanted to make something special." "Daddy, will you help me with my science project tonight?" Emma asked, her 7-year-old face bright with hope. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. Daddy's got some work calls to make after dinner." Claire saw Emma's disappointment, the way her small shoulders sagged. How many times had Daniel made and broken similar promises recently? How long had he been checking out of their family life? After the children were in bed, Daniel retreated to his office as expected. Claire followed 20 minutes later, carrying a cup of coffee as her excuse for the interruption. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting the mug beside his laptop. "Thanks," Daniel replied without looking up. His screen showed what appeared to be real estate listings, though he minimized the window quickly when she approached. "Looking for investment properties?" Claire asked casually. "Something like that, just exploring options." The voice recorder in her sweater pocket felt like it was burning against her ribs. She'd activated it before entering the office, David's coaching ringing in her ears. Get him talking about his plans. The more specific, the better. Options for what? Daniel finally looked at her, his expression guarded.
"For diversifying our portfolio. You know, I've been thinking we need to make some changes to improve our financial position."
"What kind of changes?"
"Nothing dramatic. Maybe liquidating some underperforming assets, exploring opportunities in markets with better growth potential."
Claire's heart pounded. He was describing their betrayal in financial euphemisms, probably practicing the speech he'd eventually give her to justify his actions. "Sounds like you've given this a lot of thought. Are these changes something we should discuss together? As a family?" Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, guilt, perhaps, or annoyance at her questions.
"I'm still in the research phase. When I have a concrete proposal, we'll talk about it."
"I trust your judgment," Claire said, the words tasting like acid in her mouth. "You've always been so good at planning our future." Daniel's smile looked strained. "I just want what's best for everyone." "I know you do," Claire replied, thinking of Tommy and Emma sleeping upstairs, unaware that their father was planning to abandon them. "I know you'd never do anything to hurt our family." The recorder captured every word, every pause, every moment of Daniel's discomfort with her implicit trust. Later, alone in their bedroom, while Daniel finished his work calls, Claire listened to the playback through earphones. His voice sounded different when she wasn't looking at his face, more calculated, less sincere. The euphemisms were clearly rehearsed, his responses to her questions carefully neutral. He was already practicing for the conversation, where he would announce his departure, probably framing it as a business opportunity too good to pass up. Claire deleted the voice memo from her phone and transferred it to a secure cloud storage account she'd set up that afternoon. Evidence needed to be preserved, protected, kept safe from accidental deletion or discovery. Tomorrow, she would implement the next phase of David's strategy. Tomorrow, she would start building the case that would protect her children and secure their future. But tonight, she lay awake beside her lying husband, listening to him breathe, and planned her counterattack with the cold precision of a general preparing for war. Chapter 5. The Perfect Performance. Claire woke before her alarm, her body humming with nervous energy. Today would be the test. Could she maintain the facade of an unsuspecting wife while gathering the evidence that would destroy the man sleeping beside her? The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to become just as deceptive as Daniel, just as skilled at manipulation and misdirection. The difference was her motivation. She was fighting for her children. She slipped from bed and padded to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker with practiced quiet. Through the window, dawn painted their backyard in soft pastels, the swing set where Tommy and Emma played, the garden she'd planted with such hope 3 springs ago, the life she'd built one careful day at a time. By the time Daniel appeared, Claire had composed herself into the perfect picture of domestic contentment. She hummed softly while scrambling eggs, wore the yellow sundress he'd once said made her look radiant, even added a touch of lipstick for authenticity. "You're up early," Daniel observed, pouring himself coffee. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he wore the cologne she'd bought him for his birthday, the expensive one she'd saved for months to afford. "Couldn't sleep," Claire replied cheerfully. "Thought I'd get a head start on the day. Oh, and Megan called last night after you went to bed. She wants to have lunch today to discuss some family thing." Daniel's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Megan called? What kind of family thing?" "Something about Mom and Dad's anniversary party next month. You know how she gets about planning these events." Claire kept her voice light, conversational, but she watched Daniel's reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. His shoulders had tensed, and his free hand drummed against the counter, nervous tells she'd learned to recognize over 12 years of marriage. "Are you going to lunch with her?" "I was thinking about it. We haven't spent much sister time together lately." Claire turned to face him with an innocent smile. "Unless you need me for something today." No, lunch sounds good. You two should catch up." But his eyes avoided hers, and Claire knew he was already mentally calculating how to warn Megan about this unexpected development. Perfect. After Daniel left for work, kissing her goodbye with what felt like increasing desperation, Claire drove the children to school, then doubled back to position herself across from Daniel's office building. She'd borrowed her neighbor's car, claiming her own was making strange noises, and wore sunglasses and a baseball cap that changed her silhouette completely. At 10:15, Daniel emerged from the glass tower that housed his firm. Instead of heading toward the parking garage, he walked 3 blocks to a coffee shop Claire had never seen before. Through the window, she watched him order something elaborate, not his usual black coffee, and settle at a corner table with his phone pressed to his ear. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Claire timed it, watching Daniel's body language shift from tension to relief to something that looked like excitement. When he hung up, he typed rapidly into his phone, fingers flying across the screen with urgent purpose. Claire activated her own phone's camera and took photos of Daniel through the coffee shop window. Timestamps would prove he wasn't at work during business hours, something that might become important if he later claimed his affair began after their marriage ended. By 11:30, Daniel was back in his office building. Claire drove home and called the coffee shop. "Hi, this is so embarrassing," she said to the barista who answered, adopting her most helpless voice. "My husband was in there about an hour ago. Tall guy, dark hair, wearing a blue suit. He thinks he left his wallet on the table by the window. I'm wondering if anyone turned it in." "Let me check." "No wallet here, ma'am. But I remember the guy you're talking about. He seemed pretty happy about something. Big phone call and texting up a storm afterward." "Oh good, then he probably just misplaced it at home. Thanks so much." Another piece of evidence. Daniel had been visibly excited after a lengthy phone conversation that took place outside his office. Claire was building a timeline that would show a pattern of deception, secret communications, and planning activities that had nothing to do with legitimate work responsibilities. At noon, Claire positioned herself at a restaurant 2 blocks from Megan's office building. She'd chosen the location carefully, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid accidental discovery. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she had a clear view of the sidewalk where office workers emerged for lunch. Megan appeared at 12:20, but she wasn't alone. Daniel walked beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, in a gesture Claire recognized with painful intimacy. He used to touch her that way, in the early days of their relationship, when every public appearance felt like a declaration of love. They entered a small French bistro across the street, requesting a table by the window. Claire watched them settle into their seats, noting how Daniel leaned forward with rapt attention while Megan spoke. how she reached across the table to touch his hand, how they looked at each other with the intensity of new lovers sharing secrets. The voice recorder in Claire's purse held yesterday's conversation with Daniel, where he'd claimed he would be unreachable during lunch due to client meetings. Now she had photographic evidence of where he'd actually been and who he'd been with. Her phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Rain check on lunch today? Something urgent came up at work." Claire typed back, "No problem. Maybe tomorrow?" The casual ease of Megan's lie was breathtaking. Her sister had sent that text while sitting across from Daniel, probably composing it while he watched. They were collaborating on her deception in real time, turning Claire's trust into entertainment. At 1:45, Daniel and Megan emerged from the bistro. Instead of parting ways, they walked together toward the parking garage beneath Megan's building. Daniel's car was there too, Claire realized. He'd probably been meeting her there regularly, using the underground garage to avoid being seen together on the street. Claire waited in her borrowed car until Daniel's BMW appeared at the garage exit. She followed at a distance, careful to maintain several car lengths between them. David Morrison had warned her about surveillance. Too close and she'd be discovered, too far and she'd lose them. Daniel drove not toward his office, but toward the upscale hotel district downtown. Claire's heart hammered as she recognized the route, the same area where their joint credit card had been charged repeatedly over the past 5 months. The Meridian Grand Hotel rose like a glass and steel monument to expensive taste. Daniel's car disappeared into the valet area, while Claire parked across the street, using her phone's camera to document his arrival. The timestamp read 2:07 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon when he was supposed to be working. She waited an hour before entering the hotel herself. The lobby was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, designed to impress wealthy travelers and business clients. Claire approached the concierge desk with her most charming smile. "Excuse me, I'm supposed to meet my husband here, but I can't remember which room," he said. "Daniel Evans? He would have arrived about an hour ago." The concierge's expression grew apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't give out guest information for privacy reasons." Claire nodded understandingly. "Of course, I completely understand. Maybe I could just call his room, if you could connect me." "I'd be happy to, if you can provide the last name the reservation was made under." "Evans," Claire said confidently. The concierge's fingers moved across his keyboard. Then his brow furrowed.
"I'm not showing any reservations under that name for today."
Claire felt her stomach drop.
Maybe Rodriguez? He sometimes uses his business partner's name for company bookings.
More typing.
Yes. Rodriguez. Would you like me to connect you to the room?
Actually, could you just tell me the room number? I'd rather surprise him.
I'm afraid I can't do that, but I can call up and let them know you're here.
Them. Plural. Claire's suspicions crystallized into painful certainty.
That's all right.
She said quickly.
I'll just call his cell phone. Thank you for your help.
She retreated to a seating area in the lobby, where she had a clear view of the elevators. Pulling out the voice recorder, she called Daniel's number, knowing he wouldn't answer, but wanting to document her attempt to reach him during what was supposed to be his workday. The call went straight to voicemail, as expected. "Hi, honey. Just calling to see how your day is going. Call me back when you get a chance. Love you." The casual normalcy of her own voice on the recording felt surreal. She was documenting the destruction of her marriage one lie at a time, building an evidence file that would be used in court to determine her children's futures. At 4:15, the hotel elevator opened to reveal Daniel and Megan. They emerged looking relaxed, satisfied, completely at ease with each other. Megan had changed clothes. She now wore a different blouse than she'd had on at lunch, something silky and expensive that suggested they'd done more than just talk during their afternoon together. Claire ducked behind a marble pillar, using her phone to photograph their exit. Daniel's hand was on Megan's back again, guiding her through the lobby with proprietorial confidence. They paused near the valet stand, Daniel leaning down to whisper something in Megan's ear that made her laugh. The sound of her sister's laughter, bright and musical and completely without shame, hit Claire like a physical blow. This was the woman who'd held Emma as a newborn, who'd taught Tommy to ride his first bicycle, who'd cried at Claire's wedding and promised to always be there for her family. Daniel retrieved his car first, but instead of leaving, he waited while Megan got her own vehicle. They drove away in convoy, probably planning to meet again later, or perhaps just reluctant to end their time together. Claire sat in the hotel lobby for several more minutes, processing what she'd witnessed. The afternoon had provided irrefutable evidence of Daniel's deception: the false work excuse, the secret lunch, the hotel room registered under Megan's name. But more than that, it had shown her the depth of their betrayal. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or an emotional affair that had gotten out of hand. This was planned, deliberate, systematic. They had routines, inside jokes, established patterns. They were building a relationship while systematically dismantling hers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Crazy busy day at the office, might be late getting home, don't wait dinner for me." Claire stared at the message, marveling at his audacity. He was probably driving home from the hotel at this very moment, still carrying the scent of Megan's perfume, and he had the gall to claim work was keeping him busy. She typed back, "No problem, the kids and I will eat together, hope your day gets easier, love you." The "love you" tasted like poison, but it was necessary. She had to maintain the illusion of trust until she was ready to destroy them both. That evening, Claire cooked a simple dinner for herself and the children while Daniel remained mysteriously absent. Tommy and Emma chattered about their school day, blissfully unaware that their family was disintegrating around them.
"Where's Daddy?" Emma asked, pushing peas around her plate. "Work is keeping him busy tonight, sweetheart, but he'll be home later."
"He's always busy now," Tommy observed with 8-year-old wisdom. "He used to play catch with me after dinner." Claire's throat tightened. "I know, honey. Sometimes grown-ups have to work extra hard for a little while, but that doesn't mean Daddy doesn't love you." The lie came easily, but it felt like betraying her own children. How could she reassure them of their father's love when she knew he was planning to abandon them? How could she maintain their sense of security when she was gathering evidence to prove their father was a liar and a thief? After the children were in bed, Claire uploaded the day's photos and recordings to her secure cloud storage. Each piece of evidence was labeled and dated, building toward the comprehensive case David Morrison needed to protect her interests in court. Daniel arrived home at 9:30, claiming exhaustion from a particularly demanding client presentation. He moved through their evening routine like an actor playing a familiar role, asking about the children, commenting on dinner, settling into his office to catch up on paperwork. Claire brought him a cup of coffee and settled into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd discovered his betrayal just days earlier. "How was your day?" she asked, activating the voice recorder in her pocket. "Challenging. Lots of moving pieces right now, both with existing clients and some new opportunities I'm exploring." "New opportunities?" Daniel's fingers paused over his keyboard. "Potential partnerships, investment possibilities." "Nothing concrete yet, but I'm optimistic about some significant developments on the horizon." He was describing their escape plan again, using the same euphemistic language that allowed him to tell partial truths while concealing his real intentions. "That sounds exciting," Claire said warmly. "I'm proud of how hard you work for our family." Something flickered across Daniel's face, guilt perhaps or irritation at her continued faith in him. "I'm doing what I think is best for everyone's future." "I know you are. I've always trusted your judgment completely." "Claire." Daniel's voice carried a strange note, almost like he wanted to confess. For a moment she thought he might tell her everything, might break down and beg forgiveness for what he'd been planning. Instead, he turned back to his computer screen. "I should finish this up so I can get some sleep." Claire kissed the top of his head, another performance for the recorder's benefit. "Don't stay up too late. You need your rest." Upstairs, alone in their bedroom, she listened to the evening's recording through earphones. Daniel's voice betrayed more strain tonight, less confidence in his deceptions. The weight of his double life was showing, cracking his composure in small but telling ways. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for evidence gathering. David had scheduled the emergency hearing for the end of the week. They needed every scrap of documentation they could gather before then. But tonight, Claire allowed herself a moment of grief for the marriage that was ending, for the man she'd loved who had transformed into someone she could barely recognize, for the children sleeping innocently down the hall, who would soon learn that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you most. She fell asleep clutching her phone, her evidence files, her weapons in a war she'd never wanted to fight. Claire woke Thursday morning with crystalline clarity. Today was the day she would spring her trap. The emergency court hearing was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. David had everything he needed: the financial records, the hotel receipts, the recorded conversations, the photographic evidence of Daniel and Megan's affair. But Claire wanted one final piece: a confession. She dressed with particular care in a soft blue sweater and dark jeans, the kind of outfit that suggested vulnerability rather than calculation. In the kitchen, she prepared Daniel's favorite breakfast: Belgian waffles with fresh berries and real maple syrup, the kind of elaborate morning meal she used to make on anniversaries and birthdays. "What's the occasion?" Daniel asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the stress of his deception was finally taking its toll. "No occasion, just felt like doing something nice." Claire poured fresh orange juice into his favorite glass, the one Emma had painted for him in art class 2 years ago.
"I've been thinking lately about how hard you've been working, how much pressure you've been under. I want you to know I appreciate everything you do for our family." Daniel's face went through a complex series of expressions: surprise, guilt, something that might have been genuine affection. For a moment, he looked like the man she'd married, vulnerable and human beneath his layers of deceit. "Claire, He stopped, shook his head, sat down at the table with shoulders that carried the weight of unspoken confessions. "You what?" Claire settled across from him, the voice recorder already activated in her sweater pocket. "Sometimes I feel like we've grown apart, like maybe I haven't been the husband you deserved." Claire's heart hammered, but she kept her expression soft, encouraging. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Daniel stared down at his waffle, cutting it into precise squares. "I mean, maybe we both deserve better than what we've become." "Better how?" "Happier, more fulfilled." "Sometimes people change, Claire. Sometimes they want different things, and staying together just makes everyone miserable." Claire felt like she was walking a tightrope over an abyss. Push too hard and he'd retreat, too gentle and he'd avoid the truth entirely. "Are you saying you're not happy?" she asked quietly. Daniel's knife scraped against his plate with metallic insistence. "Are you? Really? When was the last time we laughed together, really laughed? When was the last time we stayed up talking about our dreams instead of just managing schedules and paying bills?" The question hit deeper than Claire expected because there was truth in it. They had become business partners rather than lovers, co-managers of a domestic corporation rather than the passionate couple who'd promised to face everything together. "Marriage is work," Claire said carefully. "Raising children is work. Building a life together takes effort from both people." "But what if the work isn't worth it anymore? What if we're just going through the motions because it's easier than admitting we've made a mistake?" Claire's throat constricted, even knowing about his betrayal, even preparing for war. Hearing him voice these thoughts felt like emotional evisceration. "Is that what you think we are? A mistake?" Daniel's silence stretched between them like a chasm. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something she'd never seen before: pity. "I think we've both been pretending for a long time that everything was fine when it wasn't. I think we've been holding on to something that ended years ago because we were too scared or too stubborn to admit it. And what would admitting it look like?" Claire's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "I don't know. Maybe starting over. Maybe finding out who we really are when we're not trying to be the people we thought we should be when we got married. Starting over where? Here? Together?" Daniel's hesitation lasted 3 heartbeats too long. "I've been thinking about that, about what starting over would really mean. With someone else?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Daniel's face went pale, then flushed, cycles of guilt and fear playing across his features. "Claire..." "It's a simple question, Daniel. When you think about starting over, are you thinking about doing it with someone else?" "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Claire leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you having an affair?" Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he set down his fork. "I never meant for it to happen." The confession hung between them like a living thing. Claire felt something inside her chest crack open, not surprise, but the final death of hope she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "With who? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Daniel's voice came out, broken, defeated.
Megan.
Claire let the word hit her like a physical blow, let her face crumble with apparent shock and betrayal. The performance was easy because underneath her calculated rage lay genuine heartbreak, not for her marriage, but for the sister she'd lost, for the family that would never be the same. "My sister?" she whispered, making her voice shake. "You're having an affair with my sister?" "Claire, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But you are hurting me. You're destroying everything we built together." The tears came easily now, born from real grief, even if their timing was strategic. "How long?" 6 months. 6 months. Claire repeated the words like they were foreign. 6 months of lying to me. 6 months of family dinners where you both sat at my table and pretended to care about me while you were. It wasn't like that. It started as friendship. She was going through her divorce, needed someone to talk to. You were so busy with the kids, with your part-time job, and I felt invisible in my own house. So you turned to my sister. She understood what I was going through. She listened. She made me feel like I mattered again. Claire wanted to vomit. He was reciting the same justification she'd heard from Megan, the same self-serving narrative that cast them as victims of Claire's emotional neglect. And now what? You want a divorce so you can be with her? Daniel's silence was answer enough. What about Tommy and Emma? What about our children? They'll be better off with you. You're the better parent, Claire. You always have been. The casual dismissal of his own children hit Claire like ice water. He wasn't even pretending to care about their well-being. They were simply obstacles to his happiness. Problems to be managed rather than people to be loved.
Better off without their father? Better off with parents who are honest about what they want instead of staying together out of obligation and making everyone miserable. I see. Claire wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. And what do you want, Daniel? What does your honesty look like? I want a chance to be happy. I want to be with someone who actually wants to be with me, who doesn't see me as just a paycheck and a sperm donor. The cruelty was breathtaking. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, countless sacrifices reduced to a paycheck and biological function. Is that really how you see our marriage? How you see me? I see a woman who checked out emotionally years ago. I see someone who goes through the motions of being a wife because it's socially expected, not because she actually wants to share a life with me. Claire felt the recorder burning in her pocket, capturing every word of Daniel's character assassination. Tomorrow, a judge would hear these statements, would understand exactly what kind of father was planning to abandon his children for a fresh start. What about our finances, the house, the children's college funds? We'll work all that out fairly. I'm not trying to screw you over, Claire. I just want us both to have a chance at real happiness. How generous of you. Claire's voice carried just enough bitter edge to sound authentic. And Megan? She's ready to play stepmother to your children? Daniel's expression flickered with something that might have been discomfort. The children will always be my priority, but Megan and I think it might be better if they stay primarily with you. More stability, less disruption to their routines. How thoughtful. And where will you and my sister be building this new life? We've looked at some opportunities in Portland. Fresh start, new city, new possibilities. Portland. 3,000 miles from Tommy and Emma. Far enough to make weekend visits financially prohibitive. Distant enough to transform him from an absent father into a stranger who sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. Claire nodded slowly, as if absorbing the magnitude of his betrayal for the first time. I need some time to process all this. Of course, I know it's a lot. When were you planning to tell me, or were you just going to disappear one day? I wanted to wait until I had everything figured out. The logistics, the legal stuff. I wanted to make the transition as easy as possible for everyone. How considerate. Claire stood up from the table, her breakfast untouched. I think I need to be alone for a while, to think about what you've told me. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Claire, I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't about not loving you. It's about loving ourselves enough to stop pretending. Claire looked down at her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, and felt nothing but contempt for his practiced justifications and hollow philosophy. I understand perfectly, she said quietly. She left him sitting at their kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of what she now realized had been their last breakfast together as a married couple. Upstairs, she closed their bedroom door and immediately called David Morrison. "I have his confession," she said without preamble. "Everything. The affair, the abandonment plans, Portland, even his opinion of his own children." "Perfect. How do you feel?" Claire considered the question. How did she feel? Triumphant? Heartbroken? Relieved? "Ready," she said finally. "I'm ready to finish this." Tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom armed with evidence and testimony that would protect her children and secure their future. Tomorrow, Daniel and Megan would discover that the woman they'd dismissed as naive and emotionally unavailable was neither of those things. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The Cook County Family Court building rose like a monument to bureaucratic justice, all concrete and glass angles that seemed designed to intimidate rather than comfort. Claire stood on the courthouse steps at 8:30 Friday morning, clutching a leather briefcase that contained the destruction of her marriage and the salvation of her children's futures. David Morrison appeared beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in his perfectly pressed navy suit. Ready for this? Claire smoothed her conservative gray dress, professional but not aggressive, competent but not cold. Every detail of her appearance had been calculated to project the image of a wronged but reasonable wife seeking justice rather than revenge. "I've been ready since the moment I opened that email folder," she replied. The courtroom smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. Claire took her seat at the plaintiff's table, hyper-aware of the weight of evidence in David's briefcase beside her. Across the aisle, Daniel sat with his attorney, Marcus Webb, expensive and sharp-eyed, the kind of lawyer who specialized in making wealthy men's problems disappear. Daniel looked different in his charcoal suit, somehow smaller and more fragile than the confident betrayer she'd been gathering evidence against all week. When their eyes met, his expression carried a mixture of surprise and resignation, as if he'd hoped she would handle their divorce quietly and privately rather than in open court. Megan wasn't there. David had explained that she couldn't be compelled to appear at an emergency hearing unless she was served as a co-defendant, which would have complicated the proceedings. But her absence felt like cowardice to Claire, as if her sister couldn't bear to see the consequences of their betrayal played out in public. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Yamamoto." The judge entered with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human failure and deception. She was younger than Claire had expected, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail in the courtroom. "This is an emergency hearing in the matter of Evans versus Evans," Judge Yamamoto announced, settling behind her bench. "I've reviewed the initial filings. Mr. Morrison, you're seeking an immediate freeze of all marital assets pending divorce proceedings." David stood with practiced confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence that Mr. Evans has been systematically transferring marital funds to undisclosed accounts in preparation for leaving the state, potentially abandoning his minor children and depriving my client of her rightful share of marital property." Marcus Webb rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client disputes these characterizations. Mr. Evans has been exploring legitimate business opportunities that would benefit the entire family. Any financial movements have been within his rights as an equal partner in the marriage." "I'll hear your evidence, Mr. Morrison." For the next hour, David presented Claire's case with surgical precision. Bank statements showing the systematic transfers to Megan's account, hotel receipts demonstrating a pattern of adultery, photographs of Daniel and Megan together during times he'd claimed to be working, the recorded conversations where Daniel discussed new opportunities and relocating assets. Claire watched Daniel's face grow progressively paler as each piece of evidence was entered into the record. His attorney made objections, invasion of privacy, inadmissible recordings, circumstantial evidence, but Judge Yamamoto overruled most of them with increasing impatience. "Mr. Morrison," the judge said finally, "do you have any testimony to present?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Claire Evans to the stand." Claire's legs felt unsteady as she approached the witness box, but her voice came out clear and strong when she swore to tell the truth. David's questions were straightforward, designed to let her tell her story without editorializing or emotional manipulation. "Mrs. Evans, please describe your marriage to Daniel Evans." "We've been married for 12 years. We have 2 children together, Tommy, who's 8, and Emma, who's 7. Until recently, I believed we had a stable, loving relationship, built on trust and mutual respect. When did you first suspect your husband was being unfaithful? About 6 weeks ago. He became secretive about his phone, started working late frequently, grew distant from the children and me. I told myself it was work stress, but something felt wrong. What did you do about these suspicions? I tried to address it directly with Daniel, asking if everything was all right, if there was anything troubling him. He consistently denied any problems and dismissed my concerns as paranoia. When did you discover the truth? Claire took a breath, glancing briefly at Daniel. He was staring down at his hands, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes. I found password-protected emails on his laptop, detailing his affair with my sister, Megan Rodriguez. They weren't just romantic in nature. They contained specific plans to liquidate our assets, relocate to Portland, Oregon, and leave me with primary custody of our children because, in Daniel's words, quote, "We can't afford the complications of custody battles." A murmur ran through the courtroom's small gallery. Judge Yamamoto's expression remained neutral, but Claire caught a flicker of distaste in her eyes. How did you react to this discovery? I was devastated, not just by the adultery, but by the planned financial betrayal and the casual way they discussed abandoning my children. I contacted my attorney immediately to protect my family's interests. David nodded. Mrs. Evans, during your marriage, did you contribute to the family finances? Yes. I worked full-time until Tommy was born, then part-time to help with his learning disabilities, while maintaining our household and supporting Daniel's career development. I took out personal loans to help fund his consulting business, sacrificed my own career advancement to provide stability for our family. And how do you feel about Mr. Evans's plan to relocate to another state? Claire felt her throat tighten, but kept her voice steady. My children need their father. Tommy has been struggling in school and needs consistency. Emma is at a crucial age for developing trust and security. The idea that their father would willingly move 3,000 miles away, effectively abandoning them for a new relationship, is devastating to me as their mother. Thank you, Mrs. Evans. No further questions. Marcus Webb approached the witness stand with predatory confidence. Mrs. Evans, isn't it true that your marriage has been troubled for several years? All marriages go through difficult periods, but specifically, hasn't your husband complained about feeling neglected and underappreciated in your relationship? David objected, but Judge Yamamoto allowed the question. Daniel has never communicated any serious dissatisfaction with our marriage to me directly, Claire replied carefully. Come now, Mrs. Evans. Surely you must have noticed your husband's unhappiness. The late nights at work? The emotional distance? The lack of intimacy? Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. I noticed changes in his behavior, which I attributed to work stress. When I attempted to address these changes, he consistently denied any problems. And yet you've admitted to being busy with your children and part-time work. Isn't it possible that you simply weren't available to your husband emotionally? I made every effort to maintain our relationship while also fulfilling my responsibilities as a mother. If Daniel had specific concerns about our marriage, the appropriate response would have been marriage counseling, not adultery and financial fraud. Webb's smile was razor thin. Financial fraud is a strong accusation. Isn't it true that your husband was simply exploring business opportunities that might benefit your entire family? Business opportunities don't typically involve transferring $63,000 to my sister's personal bank account and booking hotel rooms for afternoon liaisons. The courtroom rippled with suppressed laughter. Webb's composure cracked slightly. Mrs. Evans, you've gone to considerable lengths to spy on your husband. Borrowing cars, following him, recording private conversations. Doesn't that suggest a level of paranoia and obsessive behavior? Claire felt her temper flare, but David's coaching kicked in. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak. I took those actions to protect my children's financial security after discovering systematic deception and asset depletion. Any parent would have done the same. No further questions. Judge Yamamoto looked at her watch. Mr. Webb, does your client wish to testify? Marcus Webb conferred quietly with Daniel, their whispered conversation growing increasingly heated. Finally, Daniel shook his head decisively.
No, Your Honor, Mr. Evans declines to testify at this time. Claire felt a surge of vindication. Daniel couldn't take the stand because any testimony would force him to admit his lies under oath, creating potential perjury charges. His silence was as good as a confession. Very well, Judge Yamamoto said. I'll hear closing arguments. David rose with confidence. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Evans has engaged in adultery with his wife's sister, systematically transferred marital assets to accounts controlled by his paramour, and planned to abandon his minor children to start a new life in another state. This isn't a case of marital discord. It's a case of deliberate betrayal and financial fraud. Mrs. Evans seeks only to protect her children's interests and secure what is rightfully theirs under Illinois law. Marcus Webb's closing felt desperate by comparison. Your Honor, marriages end. When they do, both parties have the right to seek happiness elsewhere. My client's relationship with Ms. Rodriguez developed naturally from friendship to romance. Any financial transactions were within his legal rights as a partner in the marriage. Mr. Evans is willing to negotiate a fair settlement and reasonable custody arrangement. Judge Yamamoto didn't need long to deliberate. I find the evidence compelling and disturbing, she began. Mr. Evans is clearly engaged in systematic deception regarding both his extramarital affair and his financial activities. The recorded conversations indicate a pattern of emotional manipulation and gaslighting toward his wife. Most troubling is his apparent willingness to abandon his parental responsibilities for personal convenience. Claire's heart hammered as the judge continued. Therefore, I grant the plaintiff's motion for an immediate asset freeze. All joint accounts, investment portfolios, and real estate holdings are hereby frozen pending final divorce proceedings. Mr. Evans is prohibited from making any additional transfers, withdrawals, or financial commitments without court approval. The gavel came down like thunder. Claire felt years of tension release from her shoulders as David squeezed her hand in victory. But Judge Yamamoto wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm ordering an expedited custody evaluation. Mr. Evans's plan to relocate across the country without his children raises serious questions about his commitment to their well-being. Until that evaluation is complete, he will have supervised visitation only. Claire glanced across the aisle where Daniel sat slumped in his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Marcus Webb was already whispering furiously in his ear, probably explaining how badly they'd underestimated both Claire and the strength of her evidence. As court adjourned, Claire gathered her things with steady hands. She'd won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Daniel would regroup, probably try to negotiate a settlement that minimized his financial losses and preserved some relationship with the children. But he would be negotiating from a position of weakness now, his lies exposed, his character revealed for what it truly was. David walked her out of the courthouse into the crisp autumn afternoon. How does it feel to be vindicated? Claire considered the question as they descended the steps. Below them, Chicago stretched out in all directions, 8 million people living their own complicated lives, fighting their own battles, building and destroying their own relationships. It feels like justice, she said finally. Not revenge, justice. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. We need to talk. Claire deleted it without responding. They would talk, through lawyers, in depositions, in mediation sessions designed to untangle 12 years of shared life. But they would never again talk as husband and wife, never again pretend they were partners in anything but the business of ending their marriage. That evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table helping Tommy with math homework, while Emma colored in the chair beside them. Her children chattered about school friends and weekend plans, blissfully unaware that their world had shifted on its axis that morning. Later, after they were in bed, Claire opened a bottle of wine and sat on her back porch, looking out at the yard where her children played, the garden she'd planted with such hope, the life she'd built one careful day at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, custody negotiations, financial settlements, the complex work of rebuilding her life as a single mother. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had saved her children. She had protected their future. She had proven that the woman Daniel and Megan had dismissed as naive and powerless was neither of those things.
The stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, and Claire Evans, survivor, mother, fighter, began planning the rest of her life. 6 months later, Claire stood in the same kitchen where she'd discovered Daniel's betrayal, but everything had changed.
The house was hers now, awarded to her in the divorce settlement along with primary custody of Tommy and Emma, 60% of their assets, and substantial child support payments. Daniel had moved to Portland as planned, but alone. Megan had apparently decided that a man willing to abandon his children wasn't the prize she'd thought he was. Their affair had burned out spectacularly once the thrill of secrecy was replaced by the reality of public judgment and legal consequences. The custody evaluation had been damning in its assessment of Daniel's fitness as a father. The evaluator's report noted his concerning willingness to prioritize personal desires over parental responsibilities and demonstrated pattern of deception and emotional manipulation. He was awarded supervised visitation every other weekend when he was in Chicago, which wasn't often. Claire heard from mutual friends that Daniel's consulting business had suffered badly from the scandal. Clients didn't trust financial advisors who couldn't manage their own ethical obligations, and his reputation in Chicago's close-knit business community was essentially destroyed. Megan had moved to Phoenix, sending Claire a letter of apology that was too little, too late. Claire had read it once, then thrown it away. Some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive. Some relationships too poisoned to salvage. But life wasn't just about what Claire had lost. It was about what she'd gained. Tommy's grades had improved dramatically once the stress of his parents' deteriorating relationship was removed from his life. With Daniel gone, Claire had enrolled him in a specialized program for children with learning differences, funded by the settlement money. He was thriving. Emma had asked questions about why Daddy lived so far away now. But children were remarkably resilient when given honest answers and consistent love. Claire had explained that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to protect, but that didn't mean the adults didn't love their children. It meant they didn't know how to love them properly. Claire herself had returned to work full-time, accepting a position with a nonprofit organization that helped women navigate divorce and financial independence. Her own experience had given her insights that no textbook could provide, and she found deep satisfaction in helping other women recognize their own strength. On this particular Saturday morning, Claire was making pancakes when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Claire? This is Jennifer Walsh. I got your number from David Morrison." Jennifer Walsh. The name was familiar. Another of David's clients, a woman whose husband had been hiding assets in preparation for divorce. "Jennifer, hello, how can I help you?" "I was hoping we could meet for coffee. I'm going through something similar to what you went through, and David thought you might be willing to talk to me about how you survived it." Claire looked out her kitchen window at Tommy and Emma playing in the backyard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. They were building a fort out of cardboard boxes, their heads bent together in serious consultation about architectural details. "I'd be happy to meet," Claire said. "There's a cafe on Elm Street called Morning Glory. Do you know it?" "Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you so much, Claire. I know this is probably difficult to talk about." "Actually," Claire said, watching her children through the window, "it's not difficult anymore. It's just part of my story. And stories are meant to be shared." After she hung up, Claire returned to her pancakes, humming softly as she flipped them in the pan. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter and possibility. Outside, Tommy was explaining to Emma the proper technique for building stable walls, his voice carrying the patient tone of an experienced engineer. Claire's life looked nothing like the suburban dream she'd thought she wanted at 35. She was a single mother, working full-time, navigating custody schedules and financial planning entirely on her own. Some days were exhausting, some nights were lonely, some moments brought unexpected grief for the family she'd thought she was building. But she was also stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. She was raising 2 children who understood that love meant honesty, that family meant showing up, that trust was earned through actions rather than words. She was helping other women find their own strength in the midst of betrayal and loss. Most importantly, she was teaching Tommy and Emma that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will fail you, and when they do, you don't crumble. You don't accept less than you deserve. You fight for yourself and the people who depend on you, and you build something better from the wreckage. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Claire wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, expecting a neighbor or delivery person. Instead, she found a man about her age standing on her doorstep, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and looking nervous. "Claire Evans? I'm Marcus Chen. I think you know my sister Linda. She's your banker?" Claire's mind raced. Linda Chen had mentioned her divorced brother several times over the past few months, always with the subtle hint that he was a good man who'd love to meet a strong woman like Claire. "Linda's brother," Claire said, accepting the flowers. "She's told me about you." "All good things, I hope. She told me you might be interested in having dinner sometime. If you're not ready for that, I completely understand. Divorce is, well, it's complicated." Claire studied Marcus Chen's face. He had kind eyes, laugh lines that suggested humor rather than bitterness, the sort of solid presence that spoke of reliability rather than excitement. He was the opposite of Daniel in almost every way, straightforward rather than manipulative, present rather than absent, clearly nervous about making a good impression rather than entitled to her attention. "I have children," Claire said, testing his reaction. "Linda mentioned that. 2 kids, right? I'd love to meet them someday, if things go well between us. They come first, always, before any relationship, before any man's convenience or preferences. I wouldn't expect anything else. I was raised by a single mother myself. I know what it takes." Claire felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of protective tension she'd carried for months without realizing it. "Dinner sounds nice," she said finally, "but I should warn you, I'm not the same woman I was a year ago. I don't trust easily anymore. I don't compromise." "Dinner sounds nice," she said finally, "but I should warn you, I'm not the same woman I was a year ago. I don't trust easily anymore. I don't compromise my children's well-being for anyone's comfort, and I've learned that I'm perfectly capable of being happy on my own." Marcus smiled, and Claire saw genuine respect in his expression rather than the condescending patience she might have expected. "Those sound like strengths, not warnings," he said. "Linda told me you're one of the strongest people she knows. I can see why." From the backyard came the sound of Emma's delighted laughter as Tommy successfully completed their cardboard fortress. Claire glanced toward the sound, then back at Marcus. "Saturday night?" she asked. 7 o'clock? I'll pick you up at 7. After Marcus left, Claire returned to the kitchen where her pancakes were waiting. She plated them carefully, adding fresh berries and a drizzle of syrup, then called her children in for breakfast. "Who was that man, Mommy?" Emma asked, climbing into her chair. "Someone Mommy might have dinner with," Claire said honestly. "Would that be okay with you?" Tommy and Emma exchanged the kind of serious look that passed between siblings when they were making important decisions. "Is he nice?" Tommy asked finally. "I think so, but we'll find out together, won't we?" "Does he like kids?" Emma added. "He says he does. What do you think? Should we give him a chance to prove it?" Both children nodded solemnly, and Claire felt her heart expand with love for these 2 small people who trusted her judgment, who were learning that love didn't mean blind faith, but careful evaluation and mutual respect. As they ate breakfast together in the morning, sunlight streaming through their kitchen windows, Claire reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she'd been a woman living a lie without knowing it, building her life on the foundation of someone else's deception. Now she was building something entirely different, a life based on truth, strength, and the knowledge that she could survive anything as long as she remained true to herself and protective of the people she loved. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Jennifer Walsh, early for their coffee date, but clearly desperate to talk to someone who understood her situation. Claire welcomed her in, poured fresh coffee, and settled across from her at the same kitchen table where she'd once discovered her husband's betrayal. But now the table represented something else entirely, a place where honest conversations happened, where truth was spoken and heard, where women helped other women find their strength. "Tell me what's happening," Claire said gently, and as Jennifer began to share her story of discovery and heartbreak, Claire felt the deep satisfaction that came from turning her own pain into purpose. Outside, Tommy and Emma continued building their fort, their voices bright with possibility. Inside, 2 women who had been betrayed by the men they'd trusted most,
began the work of helping each other heal and fight back. The story that had begun with discovering lies ended with creating truth, not just for Claire, but for everyone whose life she touched going forward. She had found herself not despite the destruction of her marriage, but because of it. And that, Claire thought as she listened to Jennifer's story and planned the battle ahead, was the most powerful victory of